From the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight.
Welcome to Broncos Country Tonight as we break down the latest with the Broncos head coaching search. One name is no longer on the list as Jim Harbaugh has gone back to the University of Michigan. He announced on Twitter, the president, of course, of Michigan also announced the same thing. So Michigan gets Jim Harbaugh back. The Broncos, one of their top targets, guys that they've already interviewed, no longer available.
Yeah, well, two names. I pulled myself from candidacy as well. So really two names. Okay, I'm just kidding.
Did you get that RS? PECT, the respect for the dollar sign.
Yeah, have I done that one enough?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just beat it a few more times then. I want to make sure we've beaten it just to death.
Yeah.
I think that, yeah. I mean,
RES, yeah.
RE dollar sign. All right, you get Harbaugh going back to Michigan. I mean, it's not a surprise. The ball was always in Michigan's court. I will say he was very interested in the Denver Broncos. It was just he very much preferred his job at Michigan, and he was like, here's the hard line on this. And what you'll see is a contract extension come out after the NCAA thing. They're not going to give him money before that just because of optics. So the money will come after that. Ward Manuel will quietly be shuffled on as athletic director, and they'll get a new athletic director, and everything will be right in the world in Michigan for a couple of years again until either Harbaugh, wins a national championship once more, or falls off, and they're like, hey, where's our ROI? So that's where that sits right now. But the Broncos still have, 7 names, I believe, on the list. Obviously, the internal name, Evero has already interviewed. David Shaw has already interviewed. Jim Caldwell's already interviewed. And then you get the Sean Payton, Raheem Morris as we're talking about this now. So
yep, Sean Payton, Raheem Morris on Tuesday. On Thursday, you got D'Amico Ryans, the 49ers defensive coordinator. And then on Friday, the Broncos will interview Dan Quinn and his Dallas Cowboys, who ended up soundly beating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Monday Night Football, something that I know you, as you look at me, you want to go ahead and spike the football? I mean,
and the under.
The under by half a point, but whatever, man. Whatever.
It's like horseshoes and hand grenades. You got to be in the vicinity.
Just got to be in the no, that's, I mean, whatever. That's fine. Fine. It's fine. All right. So talking about those candidates, the 4 that are remaining, if you're sort of looking at this in terms of the Broncos taking their big swings, 2 of their biggest named candidates are in this group, in this week of interviews, including Sean Payton and Dan Quinn. So what needs to happen in those interviews over the course of the next couple of days for the Broncos to feel like they get a sense of who their next coach should be?
These guys just have to sell Greg Penner, Condoleezza Rice, and George Payton on their vision. They have to sell them on, hey, I'm the person that can take this team to where it needs to go, and here's how I'm going to do it. They need to lay that out clearly and concisely. They need to lay out what their plan is if that fails, because step 1 is going to be, what can you do to rehabilitate Russell Wilson? You are tied to him next year. He is going to be here. So, the first part of your plan is, how am I rehabilitating Russell Wilson? And the second part of your plan is, what do I do if that fails? And so you've got to have both those things in play. I do think that most of these guys are actual real candidates. I don't think they're, sham interviews or any of that kind of stuff. I don't think Evero and I don't think David Shaw are going to get the job. Jim Caldwell, maybe. I think he supposedly had a pretty decent interview. I wouldn't sleep on Raheem Morris, but I hate the term big swing, because everybody say, the big swing or whatever. They're going out there and they're looking for the best guys for the job. Is it a small swing if you you get the guy you think is best for the job? Is that a small swing in some way?
Well, I mean, it's not taking anything away from the other candidates. I think you do find the right person for the job, but there's also a little bit of a splash name when you're a new ownership group. You're coming in and you're the richest owners in the history of the NFL. So I'm just saying, like this was an understanding that they were going to swing big, and which was something that was kind of wildly reported over the course of this process.
Yeah, but splash name, that's chasing brand names, and you should know, Walmart people should know, Dr. Thunder is just as good as Mountain Dew.
That's some of your best work, actually. Can I get a whole case of that? Anyways, back to the point, though, I think you're absolutely right. I think the interview process is actually kind of going both ways in all of this, right? Because it's not only about the Broncos trying to find the right head coach. If you're Sean Payton, you're trying to find the best fit for your services as well, and especially because there's a price tag on that when it comes to draft capital that you're sending over to the Saints. So there's kind of multi-layer things. And I also want to say, with these candidates, what you're asking or what you're looking for is a little bit different. From D'Amico Ryans, well, I would want to focus intently on what his staff is going to look like, because he's a first-time head coach. He's a defensive coach, and as you mentioned, one of the biggest questions is about Russell Wilson, about the offense. Okay, what is your plan on the offensive side of the ball? How can we get the best out of Russell Wilson? I think with Sean Payton, he's already going to have an opinion on that. He spent his entire life on the offensive side of the ball. He's going to have an opinion on that, and he's going to know exactly what to say there. The questions then become about his staff on the defensive side.
Well, as I say, we kind of know, or we've been hinted at, what Sean Payton's staff is. Vic Fangio's kind of lined up as the defensive coordinator. Yeah, he has other options, but he's kind of given a handshake agreement there. And then on the offensive side, Joe Lombardi. So if you like epic meltdowns against the Jacksonville Jaguars, get ready for.
I knew you were going to do something like that. Although
I've been knowing this, but I've been talking about this. This was coming the whole time. Like, if it's going to be him, that's who it's going to be. Now, will Sean Payton be the play caller most of the time? Probably. But by that same token, Joe Lombardi, the architect of that collapse is obviously going to be.
But you hire people that you're comfortable with to a certain extent, and you hire people that you can work with.
Well, and Aaron Cromer and Joe Vitt will probably be on that staff. Doug Marrone, Pete Carmichael. There are guys that. And maybe the Ryan brothers, but there are guys that Sean Payton has worked with extensively in his career that he will probably continue.
Well,
to
meanwhile, with Dan Quinn, some similar conversations,
thing, yeah, right? With Dan Quinn, you don't have any worry about his staff. He's hired talented guys before. He hired Kyle Shanahan, Mike McDaniel, Matt LaFleur, Sarkisian, Dirk Cutter, Raheem Morris. He had plenty of. He's had plenty of guys that in fact, he's really, his coaching tree is actually kind of impressive when you look at it relative to what
I just wonder
win total.
I just wonder which head coaching candidate you're
I'm
really.
talking Raheem Morris.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty obvious. Like, yeah, if you love Joe Lombardi and all his late game collapses, that's the guy that you're going to be hiring. Meanwhile, Dan Quinn, it's just rainbows and unicorns.
Everybody gets $1,000 rebate.
Right. So, listen, I think there's a lot of really interesting things with all of these candidates, and this week is going to be really, really telling on maybe a bit of the direction the Broncos are going. Now, again, they might want some second interviews. There could be other names added to the list, though. It feels like we're pretty set with this group. So for the Broncos, I guess what you're looking for is, as you mentioned it, and we'll probably spend some time, I think, this week sort of talking about the checklist of things, but you're looking for the offense. You're looking for, tied into that, Russ. You want to keep some consistency on the defensive side of the ball. You want to vastly improve special teams. All those things need to be sort of checked off, and you usually have an hour and a half to 2 hours to get that done.
Yeah, about that. No, the interviews, it's about 4 hours for these in-persons. You get a meal. And
I guess the Zooms are a little shorter.
Yeah, the Zooms are a little shorter. These in-persons are about 4 hours. And so if they can go to 6 to 8 hours if you need to. But usually 4 hours, 5 hours is kind of the mark. And the attention span starts to wane, around that part anyway. But, and you should be able to get your points across at that point. If there's other questions, if it starts going longer than that, there's one of two things: either this ain't the guy or this is the guy, and so that's kind of the thing to keep your eye on there. Laying out your vision, laying out your strategy, laying out how you're going to rehabilitate Russ, laying out your staff, laying out how your trading regimen, your off-season program. And then they'll probably get into some in-game stuff as well. Point out some situations. What would you do in this situation? What would you do in this situation? Those kinds of things, and kind of get a feel for that. You're going to ask Dan Quinn about a couple of questionable calls that he made when he was there in Arizona. I think it was that Niners game. Atlanta. In that Niners game where he made some questionable late game decisions. You ask about that kind of stuff. What would you do? What would you do differently? How should you have done it? Why did you do that? Get a thought process and understand where this person is coming from. It's not just about the numbers that they put up. It's about what it is that you think that they've done that they can implement and translate here, because there's no Drew Brees, there's no Matt Ryan, there's no, depending on which Peyton Manning, if it's called, whatever. Those guys aren't here. So, those numbers don't translate per se. There's actually no correlation between someone's success as a coordinator and their success as a head coach. There is correlation between people who have had head coach before and about 0.7 and becoming a head coach on their second stint. So, just something to keep your eye on.
All right. I glossed over it, but I want to make sure I go back to the Sean Payton compensation toward the Saints. Mm-hmm. He's reporting, because he's been on Fox telling everybody this.
It's a first rounder.
It's a first rounder. But he says a mid to late first rounder for the Broncos, which is the 49ers pick. That's looking more and more like a very late first rounder. So would that, in your opinion, look like more than just the Broncos first rounder this year?
Yes, it would. Simply by virtue of the other picks that are available. I mean, it's significantly worse than all those other picks. So, I think if they do, I think they're going to ask for more. It'll be a 1+, as I've always said. I think the trade value chart, they'll probably try to get as close to a value of about 16 as possible. That's really a midpoint. They might go a little high, might push for a little higher than that, given that some of these other teams like Carolina and Houston and Arizona or whatever have higher picks than that. But I think above 16 on the value chart more or less gets it done.
Okay, but that could be a day 2 pick for the Broncos.
Yeah, it's probably a first and a third. To be honest with you. If you're the Denver Broncos, it's probably a first and a third.
And they have a third this year, but how far into the future do they want to dip in this? And, of course, if they give up the third, then they don't have any day 1 or day 2 picks in this draft.
Well, if you give it up that much, the dude better win right away because, not only do you have to win right away, you're going to have to win with some low-rent free agents. You're going to have to figure out a way to continue to keep the roster that you have together without going over the salary cap, and at the same time, not having draft picks to replenish them. It's a tough task.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting stuff. All right. For Benjamin Allbright, I'm Ryan Edwards. Thanks for watching Broncos Country Tonight.
Denver's going to win it! You can stand up and salute in Denver, and you got the world champions that live in your town.